can see that people are joining as we speak. So I believe we are recording and we are good to go. Greetings from New York and welcome to all to the high-level webinar on population housing censuses. I'm Francesca Grum, Assistant Director at the United Nations Statistics Division here in New York, and I'll be moderating this event. Today we have a busy program. We'll start with opening remarks from Stefan Schweinfest, who is the director of the UN Statistics Division, or UNSD. We will then have a short presentation to share key findings on lessons learned from the 2020 round of censuses, and we will then move to the panel discussion with our distinguished census experts. There are a couple of announcements that we have moved to the chat, so please take a look. From my side, please do take notes and write your comments and questions in the chat. We will be monitoring that space, and later on during the Q&A session, we will pick on some of your comments. But let's start. Let me invite Stefan Schweinfest, Director of UNSD, to offer his opening remarks. Stefan.
Thank you very much, Francesca, and hello and welcome to everybody. I'm actually not at the beginning of the day. I'm not sitting in New York. I'm currently on official mission in Saudi Arabia. But I didn't want to miss this historical event, and I think it's nothing short of historical, of launching basically the next World Population and Housing Census round. So I'm very happy to connect with all of you around the world and offering you my opening reflections. So this high-level webinar on population housing censuses is the second in a series that leads up to our Statistical Commission session, the 56th session of the UN Statistical Commission, that will be underway in pretty much 1 month from now, so very, very soon. So I extend my sincere gratitude to all the speakers today to help us to warm up on a very important topic, namely the population and housing censuses. This event is going to be a wonderful opportunity to introduce our draft resolution, because one of the outcomes of the forthcoming Statistical Commission session will be a draft resolution for our Economic and Social Council to launch the 2030 World Population Housing Census Program. I will say a little bit more about the draft resolution in a few minutes, because it's very important that you know about it, you have seen it, and we want to have an early exchange with you on it. We can also here today discuss the revised principles and recommendations for population and housing censuses. This is actually our revision 4, which is the global standard on census taking. And also it is going to be, of course, very important, as we always do when we move from one census round to the next one, that we share our experiences. And the 2020 census round was certainly full of challenges, and we will hear more about it in this session. I have here a note on the importance on population and housing censuses, but I feel like I'm preaching to the converted. All of you, the over 200 people that are by now connected, are experts in this area, but I think it is worthwhile sometimes to step half a step back and reflect on this. Population and housing censuses are one of the fundamental pillars of our national statistical systems, and they are important for effective policy and decision making, and in particular in a context of our UN Sustainable Development Goals agenda. The censuses provide us with crucial small area statistics on population, on the size and the composition, characteristics, spatial distribution, and household structure, and they offer a reliable assessment of human capital, which is essential for well-being and progress. Furthermore, censuses form the bedrock for data integration and provide a vital sampling frames and are indispensables in humanitarian settings for needs assessment, targeted assistance, and intervention monitoring. Their value continues to grow as they provide benchmark data for population spines and social accounts, linking society to the economy and to the environment to inform policies and programs for inclusive socio-economic development and environmental sustainability. Especially also in the evolving landscape of our data systems, we do not only have the censuses alone. The censuses are a part of a very diverse group of data sources now. They include the surveys of obviously our administrative records, geospatial data, and other non-traditional sources. And it will be our challenge with the advancements of technology to integrate all of these information systems to provide better information and provide the granular data that are necessary for decision making. So, as census managers, and I hope and I believe many of you who are connected today are actually in exactly that category, your work is is significant for improving data, information, and knowledge. So I thank you for everything you have already done, what you're doing today, connecting at this moment of transition, and what you will do in the future. Let me say a few words and reflections on the importance of integrating the census on the geospatial information. Actually, the word census cartography was the first time many years ago I heard about the integration of statistical data and geospatial information. So you have been at the forefront of that. I'm here actually in Saudi Arabia right now on a geospatial information program for the Arab region. And our GGIM, our Global Geospatial Information Management, has turned into a program very much modeled according to the Statistical Commission, bringing together the geospatial information managers of the world to work on global standards and products. And the integration of statistical and geospatial information is not only dear to my heart, it is simply important. And your work on the census and the geocoded census give us powerful analytical tools and visualization tools. I just saw a presentation here in Riyadh on, for instance, the analysis of the distribution of schools or hospitals to provide, of course, educational and health services to the population. So it's not only the total number of these institutions that is important, but their exact location to satisfy these important needs. Let me say a few words about UNSD's role in support of census taking. This was one of the first topics we worked on as a UN community, and the Statistical Commission has looked at this since 1947. And since 1958, our office, the UN Statistics Division, has issued international principles and standards and recommendations which really, as I said, define the core characteristics of this important data source and put us all on the same page and enable us also to learn from each other. Let me say a few words about the draft resolution. So the outcome of the Commission will not only be the adoption of the new recommendations, which are our common guidebook and playbook, I wanted to say, but we will also have a draft resolution, which we will send to ECOSOC. Why do we do that? Well, we have done it previously, but we do not only do it because we have done it before. It is important. The resolution urges member states to conduct at least one census or produce comparable small area statistics during the period from 2025 to 2034. adhering to international standards. So what we are asking here for is for political support, and we need that in order to get the resource support and the political buy-in also for the use of the information that we will be producing. The resolution also emphasizes emphasizes the importance of modern practices, including georeferencing and the link to administrative data, quality standards, and timely data dissemination. So this is also important that we all understand that we are committed to using the best new technologies and link whatever we do to whatever is around us. And of course, the resolution also requests the Secretary General to provide technical assistance, develop knowledge sharing platforms, and monitor program implementation. And my office in particular is committed to that, because we know that a global program is not only the formulation of a recommendation or a standard. That's only the first chapter. The second, much more important chapter is, of course, the implementation, where we'll be working closely with you all around the world to make this actually a reality. Let me conclude by pointing out the historical opportunity, because in 2025 is the first time in the history of mankind that we launched a world population census, housing census, together with a new standard on the system of national accounts. So many countries will move into a period of reformulating, revisiting basic demographic and social statistics, but also basic economic statistics. And I think that opens a huge opportunity to better integrate these big spheres. And we are doing it at an opportune moment as we approach the end of the 2030 agenda, and we will have to start getting ready for whatever comes after 2030, because there will be another development agenda, and we as statisticians will be asked to provide the informational architecture for this. And I think we can start working on that right now. So thank you for connecting today. Thank you to my wonderful team for putting the event together. Thank you to all the speakers. And let me make one last pitch of advertisement. This is, of course, a series of events, and 2 weeks from now, we will have another high-level webinar in preparation for the Statistical Commission, looking at the SDG indicators and the way forward in that domain. So thank you for your attention. Welcome, and I'm very happy to be here with you today.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Stefan, and also for joining us while traveling and on mission in Saudi Arabia. We really appreciate it. And thanks also for introducing the draft resolution that will be discussed and adopted by the Statistical Commission in a few weeks, and for highlighting the power of census data and the importance of integrating census programs with other critical programs in national statistical offices, geospatial information systems. You mentioned the system of national accounts, something that maybe naturally we wouldn't think of, but absolutely nowadays we need to do a better job in integrating demographic and social issues with economic and environmental concerns. And so the data system that we propose needs to be properly integrated. As for the principles and recommendations on population and housing censuses that you refer to, that's the revision 4. It's the result of a long consultative process, the usual way that we come up with new global international standards. It took us a couple of years, but we are ready now for this new publication that will guide census taking for the next 10 years. And the publication, for your information, is available. It will be in a draft format. It will be presented to the Statistical Commission as a background report. And my colleagues will add the link to the Statistical Commission. I hope you can take a look before we all meet in New York in a few weeks. So let me move to introducing our distinguished speakers. I'm very pleased to have with us today Andres Vicat. Andres, maybe you want to open your camera. Thanks, Andres. Andres is the chief of the Social and Demographic Statistics section at the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe in Geneva. We also have Federico Segui. Federico is the Deputy Director General of the National Statistical Institute of Uruguay, where he is also the Data Steward and Chief Data Officer. Federico, you may want to open your camera. We have Jeff Bowlby. Jeff is the Assistant Chief Statistician, Census Regional Services and Operations Field at Statistics Canada. And Jeff was also instrumental in the preparation of the Revision 4 of the Principles and Recommendations for Population and Housing Censuses, as he led 2 of the 7 task forces behind the preparation of the publication. We have Sharti Lalda Parsad. She is the Chief Director of Statistics South Africa. She has been there working for more than 34 years, and she actually started the geography division in Statistics South Africa before moving into other roles. And Sharti is also a member of the UN expert group on the integration of geospatial and statistical information. So we will talk a lot about integrating census data and geospatial information during the panel discussion. We have Tapiwa Jamba. Tapiwa is a program and technical advisor on data generation and systems in the Data and Analytics Branch program division at UNFPA here in New York. And we have Sefi Tades. Sefi is our colleague from UNSD. Sefi is a statistician in the Demographic and Social Statistics branch, and he is the mastermind behind the principles and recommendations, the revision. He has been coordinating the making of this publication over the past 2 years. So thank you so much, Sefi. Okay, so Sefi, you are the first one to go, presenting some of the lessons learned from the 2020 round of the population housing censuses and some anticipated advances for the 2030 census round. Sefi, you have the floor.
Thank you, Francesca. I will be making UNSD's presentation on lessons learned from the 2020 census round and some of the anticipated trends for the 2030 round. The information in this presentation is based on UNSD surveys that we have conducted in the 2020 round, as well as in the previous 2010 census round. Here is the outline for my presentation. First, I'll share some of the main findings from the 2020 round UNSD surveys. And then I will share some of the key lessons from the 2020 round, again, based on the results of the survey that UNSD has conducted. Also, I will share some of the anticipated trends for the 2030 round, again, based on response to the survey that we have received. Last but not least, I will share some of UNSD's activities in terms of updating and revising its global census guidelines for the 2030 round. So here's the first finding I would like to share from our surveys. This chart presents the proportion of countries by census methodology. For the 2020 round, from this chart, we can see that 69% of countries that responded to our surveys reported that they used the full field enumeration, the traditional census, for compiling their census statistics. 18% in the 2020 round used the combined approach, where some of the information comes from administrative registers and some of the information for the census comes from field operations, whether the field operation pertains to a full field enumeration or a sample enumeration. 12% of the countries that responded to the surveys reported that they relied on a fully register-based approach to compile their census statistics. Now, comparing responses to our surveys for the 2010 round with the 2020 as well as with the 2030 round, we asked in our last survey what countries intended to do during their 2030 round. So we have some preliminary information on what type of methodology countries anticipate implementing during the 2030 round. So here we can see from the first set of bar charts that reliance on full field enumeration has declined significantly over the period 2010-2020 rounds. In the 2010 round, 85% of countries relied on the full field enumeration, whereas in 2020, a significant decrease, 69% did so. And for the 2030 round, we expect about 54% of the countries in the world would use this methodology. For the combined census and the fully registered based census, we can see that these types of census methodologies are increasingly become significant. In the 2030 round, we expect almost a quarter of countries to rely on a combined approach and almost a quarter of countries to rely on the fully registered based approach. In terms of modes of enumeration for the census, this pertains to countries that rely on the full field enumeration, the traditional census, or the combined approach. For the 2020 round, we can see that copy is the predominant mode of data collection, with 78% of countries relying on these as one of their primary modes of data collection. Internet self-response, CAWI, was employed by 44% of countries that responded to the survey. You can see that face-to-face interview with paper questionnaire has declined substantially, and in the 2020 round, only 30% of countries relied on the face-to-face interview with paper questionnaire as one of the primary modes of data collection. Telephone collection, as well as self-response with paper questionnaire, whether the paper questionnaire is mailed out and mailed back, or whether the paper questionnaire is distributed by enumerators and picked up, collected by the enumerators. These are also significant modes of data collection. Again, comparing the 2010 round with the 2020 round, we can see that the use of copy has skyrocketed. In the 2010 round, only about 9% of countries relied on this mode, whereas in the 2020 round, 78% of countries used copy. In contrast, the use of face-to-face interview with paper questionnaire, which was 86% in the 2010 round, declined to about 30% in the 2020 round. Another finding is that the majority of countries relied on more than one mode of data collection for their census, for their 2020 round census. Only about 40% of the countries that responded to the survey indicated they relied on only one mode of data collection. The majority used 2, 3, 4, even more modes of data collection. The survey requested countries to indicate what challenges they faced when implementing their 2020 round of censuses, and this chart presents the result. The need to improve coverage and data quality was cited as a significant or a moderate challenge by about 78% of the countries that responded to the survey. 76% of the countries that responded to the survey indicated that timely completion of census operations was a major challenge. Implementing new technologies and ensuring their effective use was also indicated as a significant or moderate challenge by 75% of the countries that responded to the survey. About 70% of countries cited managing public trust, recruiting and training field staff, implementing new methodologies as some of the important challenges that they faced during the 2020 round. We also asked countries to tell us what they considered to be their key achievements, their successes, their innovations during the 2020 round. And this chart presents the results from the survey. Use of improved information technologies was cited by 65% of the countries as a key achievement, and this reflects the increased adoption of digital data technologies. So there's no wonder. 61% of countries cited improving data quality as a key achievement, while improvements to data collection methods, such as the use of internet-based self-enumeration, the use of administrative data sources, was cited by 60% of the countries as a major achievement. 56% of the countries mentioned keeping census operations within budget was also a major achievement. About 50% of the countries indicated that securing financial resources, improve data dissemination, meeting deadlines, and improving logistics and coordinations were key success factors during their 2020 census operations. In terms of some of the key lessons that we have gathered from our surveys, one of the primary lessons is that when it comes to the selection of the appropriate census methodology, whether the methodology pertains to full field enumeration, combined approach, fully register-based approach, it is crucial to take into account the advantages and the limitations of each of these approaches. And assessment needs to be made in the specific context of a country, including the resources available, the data requirements, data quality requirements, response burden, cost effectiveness, efficiency. This is especially important for countries that are considering to transition from the traditional census to alternative approaches relying on use of administrative data. Before administrative records are to be used, it's important to assess if there are any coverage gaps, if there are any data quality issues, whether or not the legal framework is sufficient for the NSO to obtain the requisite individual level data from the register holders, and whether or not the scope of the demographic and socioeconomic information residing in the administrative sources meet the purposes of the census. Similarly, in the case of the traditional or the combined census, the modes of data collection needs to be selected with careful consideration. Another key lesson involves project management, and one of the lessons is that improvements in cost estimation, schedule management, and risk management are essential for a successful census operation. Also, having a robust contingency planning and having built-in flexibility to adjust timelines and operational plans are also important for a successful census operation. In terms of technology, one of the lessons is the increasing reliance on digital data collection technologies in the census operations. So it's important to recognize that while the use of such technologies can improve the efficiency and the accuracy of census operations, it's also important to have robust IT infrastructure and robust security measures in place to protect sensitive census data. Early planning and testing are also crucial when it comes to technology. Another lesson is that leveraging geospatial information and tools has led to significant improvements in the efficiency and quality of census data. The leveraging of geospatial information has also led to improved analysis and dissemination of geocoded census data. Another lesson is that robust communication strategies are critical for building trust, to keep the public informed, to address concerns of the arising from the public, as well as to encourage and improve participation of the population. Another important lesson is the importance of investing in capacity building in the training of staff, not only for the field personnel, but also for personnel involved in the processing and analysis and dissemination of the census data. Having a culture of continuous innovation is also critical for a successful census operation. In terms of some of the trends we anticipate for the 2030 round, this is based on, again, responses to UNSD surveys. We expect that an increasing number of countries will adopt a digital-first multi-mode data collection. This means an increasing number of countries will offer an internet-first data collection or a copy-first digital data collection before moving on to other modes of data collection. We also see increasing role of geospatial information and tools, not only for planning and conducting field operations, but also in the analysis and dissemination of census results. We also anticipate increasing use of administrative data sources by a large number of countries. We also anticipate lessons learned from the COVID-19 pandemic will be incorporated, especially in terms of emergency preparedness, in terms of contingency planning. We hope lessons learned in this regard will be incorporated in 2030 round censuses and make 2030 round censuses more resilient to external shock. Last but not least, we also anticipate increased integration of population data sources, with the census being the pillar or the spine for data integration. I will conclude by sharing some information on UNSD activities in terms of updating and revising its international census methodological guidelines for the 2030 round. As already mentioned by Stefan and Francesca, we have just concluded the revision of the principles and recommendations for population housing censuses, and it's to be submitted to the Statistical Commission for its endorsement in a few weeks. In the coming months, UNSD will be busy with initiating the revision of its handbook on geospatial infrastructure in support of census activities. UNSD will also be busy with updating its handbook on the management of census operations. This is essentially for the traditional or the combined census approach. With this, I conclude my presentation. Thank you, Francesca.
Thank you so much, Seifi, for highlighting some of the key lessons learned during the 2020 round. Many of the things that you pointed out will further be explained and unpacked by our distinguished speakers: digitalization, the use of new technologies, moving towards register-based censuses, so changes in census methodology, the use of geospatial information, and of course, developing contingency plannings. I also want to point out that Seifi just gave you a little bit of the essence of the lessons learned, but he mentioned that UNSD conducted this extensive survey recently. And we thank all the member states who share their experiences and their planning for the 2030 with us. If you want to have the full report and all the lessons learned, we will share on the chat the link to the report, and we hope that you'll take your time to revisit those findings as we will discuss them also at the session on population housing censuses during the upcoming Statistical Commission in March 2025. But let's move to our next speaker, Andres. I can see you. If we stay within the topic of lessons learned from the 2020 census round, could you share some of the major lessons learned that emerged from the region you support? And it would be also nice to hear some words on the ECE census recommendations and how they reflect specific regional needs while ensuring alignment with the global standards. Thank you, Andres.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for inviting me to this panel. Well, at UNEC, we indeed work closely with countries on censuses. We have also surveyed their practices in the 2020 round in detail. And as you may know, the census recommendations of the Conference of European Statisticians are currently approaching the final stretch of discussions. So also to mention that UNEC region comprises Europe, North America, and Central Asia. And when we come to talk about the lessons from the 2020 round, well, what Seifi presented generally applies to the UNEC region as well. But there are quite a few points that I would like to emphasize in reference to what we have heard. Yes, there is now a greater variety and complexity of census designs. It is not only that there are more combined and register-based censuses, but also there is more variety among the combined censuses, as there are censuses with registers and a full field enumeration with different extent of variables covered in the field enumeration. There are censuses with registers and sample field data and different sizes of these samples. But generally speaking, a lot of the change towards broader use of administrative data in the censuses has been also driven by countries in the UNEC region. So in this round, a quarter of all censuses were fully register-based, and the rest were divided equally between combined censuses and those that were fully based on field enumeration. Also, in terms of terminology in the new recommendations, we refrain from using the word traditional, because tradition can already mean quite different things for the countries that have been using registers for decades, for example. And then the prediction for the 2030 round, based on our survey, is that in the region, indeed, nearly half will be fully register-based censuses, and only every sixth country would rely solely on field enumeration. So the recommendations have to cater for this, and in addition to our general census recommendations, there is also a guidance on the assessment of quality of administrative data for their use in censuses that can be very helpful. Generally speaking, censuses in the UNEC region tend to become more as integrated parts of population data systems, and this kind of idea that once in every 10 years we have a snapshot is giving way to more frequent and continuous ways of collecting data, presenting data, and the new legislation in the European Union tries to call for annual population figures, so adding pressure to developments in this direction. And concerning dissemination, there is more of a view that the user is not caring so much as to where the data comes from as about that having the necessary data, and the dissemination is not necessarily census connected, but connected to the topics, and census being just one of the sources that provides important data on a great number of topics. What we learned is also the growing importance of building strong relationships between national statistical offices and the holders of administrative data sources, as more and more of these sources are used, and strong legislation is needed to secure access to these data sources and to safeguard confidentiality. So there are also needs for more modern communication strategies, which was already mentioned, and we saw as 2020 round was really connected or happened at the time of the pandemic, that this need for emergency preparedness is stronger. The whole chapter was expanded or created and expanded in our census recommendations. And further, we recognize that the pandemic also accelerated several changes that were already underway towards more use of administrative data and more use of technology. So in total, our recommendations try to consider all of this. They are consistent with the global principles and recommendations, and they put more emphasis on the specificities of the region, also considering that in a region with a lot of developed statistical systems, some data are best gathered from other sources than a census, having good vital statistics, detailed information on living standards, and so forth. And there is now a higher level of attention on technological issues, on a new material on the measurement of sex and gender and the related classifications, and overall focus on specific things that matter for countries of the region. But our recommendations don't have the ambition of being a full handbook for all the things to be considered. It's supposed to complement the global principles and recommendations. it also caters for the developments and planned legislation of countries of the European Union, so that they can actually follow the Conference of European Statisticians recommendations, and takes into account the regional interests and practices in the Commonwealth of Independent States. What I wanted also to mention that in order to ensure the practicality of our recommendations, it has been developed with a large number of national experts. More than 200 are listed in the current draft of the recommendations, and this way we ensure that the best practice is represented, the best understanding on the national level, and we also ensure that people who develop these recommendations understand that they are developed in order to be applied in practice, and that is always connected to the realities in the field, realities in the statistical offices. So this is the general picture on our recommendations. In terms of timing, we are scheduled for having endorsement at the plenary session of the Conference of European Statisticians in June for these recommendations, and I am convinced that they are going to provide a lot of helpful practical guidance when the countries embark on their censuses on the 2030 round. Thank you.
Thank you, Andres. Absolutely, I agree with you. The set of recommendations at the regional level will also be instrumental in guiding countries in their efforts to collect census-like data. I also want to remind all our participants that the two sets of recommendations, the global one and the regional one, have been developed very, very closely. A lot of experts, of census experts, contributed to both publications. So we are 100% sure that the key messages that this latest set of principles and recommendations are offering to countries are very much consistent. Let's move to our next distinguished speaker, Federico. If you want to open your screen, you are here. Yes, I see you. Federico, Uruguay's census in 2023 was groundbreaking. Congratulations. It combined administrative data with the traditional census. Can you share some of the benefits you saw from this approach and provide also some advice to other countries thinking about incorporating administrative data into their censuses? Thanks, Federico.
Thank you, Francesca. Thank you for the invitation. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Thank you for the question, Francesca. Let me say that the 2023 combined census in Uruguay is the first one in the Americas region to combine administrative registers with questionnaires by CAWI, CAPI, and CATI method to count and characterize the entire estimated population of the country. For the first time, the 2023 census has accurate estimates of population by age and sex in municipalities and small areas, something that did not happen in previous censuses. By using about 10% administrative data along with 90% fieldwork, we were able to complement the traditional enumeration process, reducing risk of missing people and improving data accuracy. One of the biggest benefits of this approach is that we use real data from administrative registers instead of synthetic imputed data, and for the whole estimated population of the country. But beyond just this census, the biggest impact is that we established a new model for future censuses, when that is more cost-effective and sustainable. It's a game changer for how censuses will be conducted in Uruguay moving forward. A lot of thought went into this decision using admin data. First and foremost, we needed to ensure data quality, of course, and that the administrative registers were reliable, up to date, and well linked to our census data. This required a strong statistical infrastructure, which have been building over time. In this direction, I advise to invest in a system of integrated statistical register and shared statistical data warehouse. Uruguay's success is built on this infrastructure, which is the backbone of its socio-demographic statistics. Another piece of advice is to test new approaches, for sure. For instance, running a pilot alongside a traditional census allows for testing and refinement of new methodologies before the full implementation. I think is seek technical assistance. You will benefit from technical assistance from other NSOs like Statistics Norway and New Zealand, and also from international organizations. USD support us during this process. Thank you, Francesca, and your team for that, which can be valuable for other countries undertaking similar initiatives. Another big factor was methodology. We had to develop different ways to integrate administrative data, the field enumeration. Moreover, we use the sign of life methodology, designed to verify people's residence in the country. We also prioritize transparency. We made it clear where each data source came from, whether it was from a administrative register or traditional enumeration, so that researchers and policymakers could understand and trust the results. When presenting census results and methodology, be very clear about the decisions taken and openly explain the method and sources used. For instance, in our case, we provide access to microdata for researchers, and we mark the data source of each row of the census data set, which is census questionnaire and the method CAWI, CAPI, CATI, or administrative registers. So researchers can choose and filter the rows they want to use. Also, the dashboards and charts clearly explain where the data sources are considered in each case. We published how we estimate total population of the country by direct and indirect methods, and we published the omission of the questionnaire enumeration field phase, which was complemented by administrative enumeration during the data processing phase. So we were so clear on that, we didn't try to mislead the users. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Federico, for sharing the experience of Uruguay in transitioning towards a combined census. And I have a lot of questions, but we are running a little bit out of time. I'll keep them for later. Of course, thanks for highlighting the importance of piloting, the importance of assessing the quality of the records, administrative registers, the importance of being transparent and properly communicating the changes in the census methodology and many other important points. A couple of things I want to share with all. I see some hands up, and that's perfect because we want to hear from you, the audience. But at this point, it would be lovely if you can write your comments, your reactions, your questions in the chat, because that would also give some time to our speakers to take a look and maybe start engaging with you, I promise that I'll keep some time to hear from you. And that's also a warning for our speakers. I had a second round of questions. We may skip that. Because again, I'm a little concerned about time. So whatever you want to say that are fundamental for your intervention, please try to do so as I give you the floor. So having said that, let's move to our next speaker. It's Jeff from Statistics Canada. Jeff, based on Canada's experience with the 2021 census that was conducted during the COVID-19 pandemic, what strategies would you recommend to national statistical offices to keep their census plans on track in case of major disruptive events, like, again, another pandemic or a natural disaster? What's your advice? Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Francesca. It's a pleasure to be here today, an honor really to be here with you to share the Canadian experience and work with you as we prepare to use the next PNR for our upcoming censuses in 2026 and 2031. So yes, COVID was a major disruption to the Canadian census, as it was in many parts of the world. The answer to your question, I think, lies in a statement that I'll say right now. The countries that run censuses traditionally, like Canada, even those that use administrative censuses, are used to extended periods of planning before they execute on their census. And COVID, what that did was cause us to redo that period of planning, and where we had extensive periods, typically before a census, where we have time to plan and prepare and get ready, we had to make changes on the fly as a result of COVID. Now, in Canada, we were able to accomplish our goal of a very high response rate for the census. We achieved 98% response on the census in 2021, despite the pandemic. So I think that what I'm about to describe, we can say is a best practice, things that can be adopted for future emergencies in other countries. So there's always going to be something that disrupts a census. This time around, it was COVID in 2021, but we also had to deal with fires in Canada. It was a particularly heavy forest fire season, and it was particularly heavy in areas where the population of Canada tends to live, most especially in the west coast of Canada, where there was, in British Columbia, some significant fire activity that impeded our operations. But in the COVID context, in 2021, we basically had 8 months to prepare for COVID, and we had to find ways, as I said earlier, to move away from an extended period of planning and preparation to a relatively short period of preparation and planning. We had 8 months to adapt our operation so that we would still achieve our high response rate that Canadians expect of us, and meanwhile not get people sick. We could not be a vector of the spread of the disease. So we had to develop a plan on the fly, and really, you know, the fact that we had to develop a plan on the fly demonstrates why we needed to make some important changes to the 2030 round version of the PNR, the Principles and Recommendations document. There really wasn't a well-described framework for how to respond to an emergency such as COVID. No one had thought of this. However, in Canada, like in other countries, we do have rigorous project management principles in place, such as things like a risk register. We had a risk register, we could turn to it, although there was no specific risk associated with COVID that we had on our risk register, where we could learn from the mitigations for forest fires, earthquakes, etc., that we did have on our risk register, and we could adapt those for COVID. So having a risk register is something definitely everybody should have in advance of a census, so that you can respond properly to emergencies such as COVID. One of the things that we learned is necessary as well is to have techniques that allow us to respond quickly. There needs to be fast workflow for the many changes that are sometimes required for an emergency such as COVID or forest fire, whatever it might be. So using lean, agile, Kanban boards, etc., is something to be learned from the Canadian experience. I think it facilitated our ability to react quickly. One last thing I'll mention, Francesca, before we move on, practice, practice, practice. Imagine yourselves in scenarios with your team in advance of the census so that you know how to trigger the different mechanisms that might be required in order to respond properly to an emergency. So we ran rehearsals before the 2021 census, imagining ourselves in worst case scenarios with all of the team around the table, including the most senior individuals in the organization. The chief statistician was involved in these practice sessions. Imagine ourselves in these terrible scenarios, how would we respond? And we would practice these scenarios in advance. So practice, practice, practice is another bit of advice for countries on the call today. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jeff. And indeed, the revised principles and recommendations, thanks to the excellent experience that Canada shared, reflect properly. This is definitely a new chapter, a new component in this revision of the PNR. It's all about contingency planning to make future censuses resilient. And they are really based on country practices and how country quickly reacted and become more agile, mainly during the COVID pandemic. So yes, census manager should develop mitigation and contingency plans for various emergencies and different scenarios. Let's move to our last distinguished speaker. It's Sharti, our expert on geospatial information systems. Sharti, we know that geospatial information is crucial for modern censuses. Could you share how South Africa integrated geospatial information into its 2022 census and how this integration improved not only the operational efficiency of the census, but also the quality of the resulting data? And again, dear audience, please write your questions in the chat because after Sharti, we'll move to the Q&A session. Thank you, Sharti.
Thank you, Francesca. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you and we see you. Thanks.
All right, great. So very warm greetings from me. And I think my job's a lot easier because a lot has been spoken about geospatial information. From the time I think I started geography division and begging for budget, taking a little bit of money and trying to start this up, I think we've come a long way. And the census is a very big impetus for geospatial information. Every census, we seem to be doing this better and better and improving. And I'm very excited about what we're hearing now. So the geospatial information, the real goal there was to have a complete and consistent frame, geospatial frame, of course. We've learned that the hard way. Everything has to be linked to a geographic point, have to be locatable, and that one that can run through all the different census processes. So again, we took a decision as well, like everybody, like most people, you had to go completely digital, CAWI, CAPI, CATI, and then that just changes the entire value chain. And you can actually see how geospatial technologies and tools, right from the mapping application to the collection of the data. So the manner in which geospatial information was used for Census 2022 in the country, we can actually say that geospatial information has actually driven the 2022 census. I mean, not really enabled, but really, driven that. Then I want to talk about, a few things as well in the spirit of sharing and learning and actioning. And even in the spirit of this recommendations of the handbook that we've actually prepared now, we have institutionalized the GSGF, the Global Statistical Geospatial Framework. It's in our work program that gets signed by the head of the organization, that gets presented to our minister, that that we become accountable for. That's one. And the other thing in terms of learning, we also took from GeoStat 2, UNECE, and in the previous census was very area-based and a very sort of passive role of geospatial information. But in this one, we actually went down to the point, the dwelling point, households linked to that, persons linked to that. So it's really, really locatable. So I'm going to skip the issues around small area estimation because I think Stefan also spoke a lot about that. But in really a financially constrained environment, having the geospatial information really helps us with the spatial targeting, spatial intervention. So we know exactly where to start. So when we start joining all this information, and that I feel is so, so important, especially in the situation, financial situation that any organization, local municipality, etc., is in. I'm going to talk a little bit, since you said we don't have a round two, and I wanted to actually talk a little bit about, and I see our colleague is in the chat, Pedro, also spoke about that. So if you look at the geographical hierarchy or the geographical frame, the NSO is responsible for relatively few of the coverages at the end of the day, and we are so dependent on all the different stakeholders that provide us this information, that we base our enumeration area on, our addresses, our dwelling points, etc. So I think even in our country, we still, we have to kind of like step out of our organization and see how we, and even the GSGF actually needs greater collaboration. That's actually written in the RGIF as well, collaboration, coordination to provide that information that we need. I see, Pedros, you speaking about the property registers, etc. But this is where we have to actually develop what we call and move at a faster speed, a greater speed, so we make it for 2030 as well, to develop what we call SASTI, the South African Spatial Data Infrastructure. That's actually aligned to the IGIF. And there's such important pathways there. If you actually look at, for example, the pathway on capacity building, we receive a lot of information from our local municipalities that really do need that capacitation. How do they actually make geospatial information the heart of everything they actually do, and collect information with the standards that we require so that we can just use it. So the moment we get like 250 different sets and different versions, different standards of information, we have to put that together. So yeah, so I think this is very important for us as we move forward. And that also implies to our administrative data. It's very nice listening to Federico about how they combine administrative data. So we still have a lot way to get the location information correct in our administrative information. So we can actually, because location is a very good integrator, information from Department of Health, security, and even from what you speak about. Yeah, so those are some of the things that I think are really, really important. You spoke earlier around, we said that the geospatial information, really, we've really done well on the census side, but how do we actually take this across now and integrate our business register, where we have all our institutions there? And that's also an exercise that we are busy with the data lakes, with other government departments, and to and to have the institutions there, the businesses there, properly geographically referenced, so we can start integrating that. So that's just a little bit of our story at Statistics South Africa. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Sharti, to you for being with us. I think these are also great opportunities for the two communities of experts, the census managers, the geospatial information experts to connect, to develop common language, and to really start working closely together. So the more we bring this diverse community together, I think the more successful we will be as a community in integrating the different data sources and to leveraging the power of geospatial information. I also like the fact that you highlighted other innovations in the 2022 census in South Africa, the full digitalization of each step of the census undertaking, and I believe that also facilitated the integration between census data and geospatial information. And of course, you mentioned a few times the global statistical geospatial framework that now it's completely embraced and institutionalized within Statistics South Africa. So a lot to learn from your country, and our role as the UN is, of course, to bring up best practices and make sure that everybody can learn from each other. So thank you, Sharti. I think it's already 9:07 here in New York. We have another 20 minutes or so, and there is still our Tapiwa, who is coming back in a few minutes, to share his perspective. But before Tapiwa, I'd like to give the floor to some of you to see what are the key issues, key questions, something that was triggered by our speakers. I'm just checking if I can unmute you. Okay, everybody's unmuted, so hold on. Let me give you the floor as I see you, if you have your hands up. No, nobody has the hands up. Who wants the floor to ask the questions that you wrote in the chat? Otherwise, I can pick and choose from the chat and read them. Anybody wants to take the floor? Okay, I have multiple screens. Let me see. There were a few questions on the move towards relying more and more on administrative records. And so I believe that maybe, Federico, you are the best positioned to give us your views on those questions. Federico.
Thank you, Francesca. I think I already answered some of them in the chat, but I think that one of the biggest challenge in integrating admin data is, in our case, we don't have a central administrative population register like the Nordic countries do have. So in our case, we have to integrate different administrative sources to build the statistical population register, and also use the sign of life methodology. In our case, we developed a residence index. So this index, we use a threshold based on this index to establish the most likely resident population in the country by the end of the year. And also the problem maybe is with the migration register, the quality of these different data sources. So in our case, we use these different approaches to building this statistical population register. Thank you.
Thank you, Federico. And I see there are a lot of questions on how to move towards register-based censuses and practical questions also. And I invite you to connect with Federico, who is very generous in offering support and sharing his extended and very broad knowledge. And I believe you also have a couple of papers of documents that could be shared so that our colleagues in the audience can really take their time, review, and then connect back with you with specific questions. So please.
Yeah, more than happy with that. I already put into the chat my email and also address, and also one of those documents. Thank you.
And again, please do so, connect with Federico, involve us if you need any specific support. We are here to help. There was an interesting question on AI. Nobody has talked about AI yet, but if any of our speakers would like to engage and say a few words on that, is there a role for AI as we move towards the 2030 census program? Seifi.
Yes, I would like to just mention that in terms of use of AI and machine learning, from our survey, what we have learned is that some countries are using it in the data processing stage, especially for coding open-ended questions. And that's where we have seen so far the most important, the most significant or direct practical use of AI and machine learning. And also some countries are also using it on an experimental basis with regard to analysis of geospatial information. So that's what we have picked up from our surveys. Thank you.
Yeah, so does it mean, Seifi, that we'll have to look at those issues and maybe develop some guiding material based on current practices to support countries? Is it something that we should put in our list of to-do?
Definitely, this is something going forward is emerging an important area in terms of innovation and use of technology. So we are keeping our eyes on developments in this regard, and we're trying to collect country experiences so that we can develop some kind of useful guidance.
Yeah, that we will develop with all of you, of course. I see our speakers. Anybody else? Jeff, Andres?
Yeah, I can jump in. In the 2021 census, we made great use of machine learning in the ways that Seifi was describing for coding. We saved a lot of time, a lot of money, and it was actually time saved that we needed because of COVID. We had an extension of our collection period, but we didn't change the dissemination period. Those steps in between, we needed to find efficiencies. And happily, we had before COVID planned to use machine learning on a much larger scale than we'd ever used any sort of auto coding in the past, and it worked phenomenally well. I would say that there's other applications of AI as well, lots of potential there for AI. In 2026, our next census, we're planning on using a chat bot to help respond to the questions that respondents have. So when, as in other countries, you launch a census, there's lots of problems or questions that people have that they need solved. Traditionally, we rely upon scores of people answering phone calls, but we're going to be making use of automated chatbot to help respond to those questions. In addition to the telephone calls, we're not getting rid of any way of responding to questions. We're just adding a chatbot in. We're also thinking of translation, very important in dual language, English-French country in Canada. Everything that we produce needs to be produced at the same time, of the same quality in both official languages, English and French. We've tested a translation device that uses generative AI, and it in fact does better than the human translator does with its first pass of the translation. So we'll be making use of that to speed up and save costs as well. There's a few others, but I'll leave it at that. These are the highlights of our planned AI use.
Yes, thank you, Jeff. Oops. Of course, these are all new experiences that are still at the country level, but our commitment is to bring them up, have a collection of experiences, bring together experts to decide how to package this information to bring it back for other countries to use. It will be about the use of AI. It will be also about how to use the sign of life methodology. I believe Federico mentioned that. And again, we see a lot of potential at the country level, but we need to reconvene and come up with some best practices and agreements that other countries may follow. I see there is Diego, but I'm not sure I can enable the mic. Do you want to give it a try, Diego? Diego Iturralde?
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Hi, Diego.
Hello. Yeah, the chat is not working on my side, so I thought I would ask my question in person. And I'd like to ask the question about the response from the public towards a population census in a climate where response rates are declining and where participation in data collection is declining, possibly as a result of COVID and of the restrictions that were imposed on us by the state in our respective countries at that time. I know it's possibly not across the board. I think there are some countries where responses have been very good, but other countries where response and participation and collaboration with statistics officers during census have not been good. So when Seifi was talking about future challenges for the 2030 round, I was thinking that there's really a strong need to emphasize the issue of publicity around census. There's a need to emphasize and publicize the multimodal approach that many countries are adopting, so that people know that they have options. That you can either be visited by a field worker, you can take the questionnaire or the survey on the telephone, or have a web interface in which you can respond to it. And that these modes are well publicized amongst communities, so that if there's a part of the community that's not willing to open their door to a field worker, that instead of that, they can make use of other mechanisms to respond, and so that these response rates are not compromised as a result. Thank you so much.
Anyone?
I can give it a shot as well on this question. On your last point, we certainly did that in Canada, where up until the 2016 census, our online option to respond to the census was not available in all parts of the country. There was an assumption that in, for example, the far north of the country, the Arctic, or very remote areas, that internet connection was insufficient for that kind of response. But COVID changed that perspective. What we decided to do, one of the first things that we did, in fact, as a part of our COVID reaction plan, was to open the internet option for everybody in the country, so that people could respond to the census in a way that they felt was safer. You wouldn't have to interact with someone and therefore potentially get sick from them. So that was certainly one of the most important mitigations that we put in place. But there were many others. The protocols at the doorstep needed to change. So we made that publicly available, let people know that we would not be going into their homes, that we would be only approaching them at the doorstep. We'd stay outside, in other words, so that would lower the risk. We were telling people that we were going to make sure that all of our enumerators that were going door to door were going to be wearing PPE, the masks. They were all carrying hand sanitizer, etc., to minimize the risk that there'd be any spread of the disease. This was all very public. We were advertising this in advance of our operations in the field. I would say, though, that it certainly was a challenge. We did have to extend collection. We didn't do it in the same time period that we would have otherwise. We had to extend by 2 weeks our collection in the southern part of the country, and by about a month in the northern part of the country, where it was particularly difficult to enumerate due to COVID. The response patterns indicated that there was probably a population that was very much in favor of the government's response to the pandemic. We were enumerating during a particularly bad wave of COVID, and while our government was actually still popular in its response, people were eager to respond to the census at first. Our response pattern showed we were running ahead of schedule for the first week and a half of our operations, and considerably so. but then it just stopped. It leveled off. The response rate pattern slowed down, and we actually took longer, as I described earlier, to get the last bit of the population. So I think there was a polarization caused by the pandemic that made people either agree with the government and therefore agree to respond to the census, or grumpy, upset, frustrated with the government and therefore less likely to respond to the census. We saw that in our response patterns. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. Jeff, Seifi, you have the floor. Just quickly, I want to give Tapiwa the time to sum up. Thanks.
Yeah, just to add that in addition to offering various modes of data collection options, and of course, publicity and communication campaigns, what we have seen is some countries also who initially did not have a plan to use administrative data sources during COVID because of the reluctance of some of the population to participate, they have to resort to using administrative data sources. But of course, that's not an option for all countries. It's only for those countries in which administrative data is of good quality and of good coverage. But decision has not been made to use it for the census purposes initially. But during COVID, some of the innovation happened around the use of administrative data sources as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to all of you. And I acknowledge that there are a lot of great questions in the chat. We are running out of time, unfortunately. As usual, we would need 3 hours rather than 1 hour and a half to make proper justice to all our distinguished speakers. But please feel free to reach out to us, to the speakers, and we can continue the discussion. But now I'd like to invite Tapiwa, our dear Tapiwa, for some summary of the discussion and your views on what's going to happen next in the 2030 census round. Tapiwa.
Thank you. Thank you, Francesca. And thank you to all the panelists for the contributions. I think, well, I'm happy that we opened the webinar by being reminded by Stefan about the importance of census. Sometimes, because it's part of our daily work, we kind of forget the significance and importance of the census beyond just being a data collection exercise. And I think it's good that we got that reminder at the beginning. Now, looking at the contributions from the panelists, I think when I look at all of them, reflecting on the 2020 round, I'm convinced that the 2030 round that is coming, what we really want out of the 2030 round is not too different from what we wanted in the 2020 round. If anything, we are probably looking for more from the upcoming round. So we are still looking at the successful implementation, adherence to international standards, and in this frame, we do have UN principles and recommendations, the 4th revision. Let's look at this as just as a first step, and we need to ensure or to support the implementation of the principles and recommendations on the ground. I'm also looking at the conclusion of the 2020 round, because once we launch the new round, the focus is going to be on the 2030 round. But let us not forget where we're coming from. And let us also not forget that currently we are sitting on a lot of data that was generated during the 2020 census round. I think there's a lot we can do or we can facilitate in producing from this data that we currently have. So let's not forget that we do have data, and let's do our best to support exploration of this data, the mining of this data, to answer some of the data needs that countries have. Where needed, let's support our national counterparts to ensure that these data are analyzed and that these data are utilized. In looking at the type of, I mean, the kind of support, what do we need to do? I think, again, reflecting on the different contributions from different panelists, my take is that, well, we will need to continue to provide technical support. We will need to provide fora and platform for knowledge sharing, promoting South-to-South cooperation. There's a lot that countries can learn from each other. I think you all just heard from what the other panelists shared in regards to what they did in their countries. So there's a lot that we can learn from each other. So let's ensure that as we embark on the 2030 round, we really leverage those experiences and build on those. The issue of innovation and technology, we are not going back on innovation and technology. I think if anything, it's going to be more. I'm happy that in the end, the issue of AI was mentioned, because it's really something that we cannot pretend is not around us. So I think we really need to engage with each other to figure out the opportunities that this presents in the 2030 round and the risks that comes along with AI as well. We also have the issues of resource mobilization. We need to also be creative in the way that we mobilize resources to support implementation of the 2030 census round. Now, on this front, I think let's also remember that in the 2020 round, almost 20% of countries missed the 2020 census round. And these are countries that housing 30% of the global population. So it's something we can also not just ignore as we prepare for the 2030 census round. So for these countries that missed, and amongst the countries that missed, some, we know they are capable of conducting a census, but there are others that have not held a census in many, many years. So what can we do? Is there anything that we can support such countries with if they are actually not able to conduct a census? As members of the statistical community, we know how important population data is for sustainable development goals, for national development plans. So what do we do? Is there anything that we can do? So I'm just posing this as food for thought to say, let's think about, let's not forget our colleagues that were not able to conduct a census during the 2020 census round. Again, you know, we have this ever-changing global funding environment. So what does it mean for the 2030 census round? We really need to again engage and be creative to find sustainable solutions that will enable many of the countries to successfully implement the 2030 census round. Lastly, Francesca, I just want to highlight issues to do with inclusion, inclusivity, visibility, and participation in census. These issues vary across regions, but they are real issues that countries are grappling with. So let's also not forget these issues, and as we engage, try and find lasting solutions that will ensure that we don't leave anyone behind. Thank you, Francesca.
Thank you, Tapiwa. This was a great summary of the discussion, but also really highlighting some of what we anticipate will happen in 2030. So thanks for being with us and for sharing your knowledge and your perspective that we also agree completely with. We are unfortunately in the position now we have to close the meeting. I want to thank all of you, first our speakers, for sharing your knowledge, for accepting this invitation, and for being with us and supporting our work. I want to thank our participants. You were many. I think at one point there were 303 people in the room. So I'm completely touched and very honored to have such a great community working on this important topic. But this is the beginning of the conversation. As Stefan mentioned at the beginning, this is one of the high-level events as we prepare to meet again at the Statistical Commission in New York in March 25, so in just a few weeks. And we will continue to discuss the importance of censuses, how to better integrate census programs with other critical programs in national statistical offices and national statistical systems. So please do join us in a few weeks, and we will continue to collaborate and discuss how to move forward to ensure that censuses remain agile, resilient, and relevant to inform social, demographic, economic, and environmental concerns. So with that, thank you very much again, and let's stay connected. Thank you. Be well.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
participating.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye. Goodbye.